Okay, so 2019 has seen the release of two new iPads, the iPad Mini 5 and the iPad Air 3. I've already done my artist opinion of the iPad Mini 5, and today I'm going to do my opinion of the iPad Air 3. And I'm also going to do a discussion about the other options available to you as well. So hopefully, despite all the options and confusion over which iPad is best, I'm going to be able to offer some insight as to which might be the best for you. So obviously the latest iPads are created for a different audience from the top range, the iPad Pros, which are near enough £1,000 or $1,000. Now these are significantly less expensive, but obviously there are sacrifices there, less features, and we're going to explore some of the options between the different available iPads on the market. So this is the iPad Air 3. It is basically the same form factor as the 2017 iPad Pro, the 10.5 inch version. So it's 10.5 inches across diagonally, and that is bigger than the 9.7 standard iPad that's currently available, new from Apple, and that is just the standard iPad, and that's the 6th generation. This is the 3rd generation iPad Air. Now I've had the previous iPad Airs, the iPad Air 2, that was a number of years ago now, so this is significantly upgraded since then. It obviously is compatible with Apple Pencil, but like I say, it's essentially in many ways actually an iPad Pro. So in terms of proportions, the screen is the same as 2017 iPad Pro, the 2nd generation iPad Pro for that matter, and it's pretty much the same kind of weight as well. This actually has fewer colour options than the iPad Pro from 2017. It has 3 colour options. We've obviously got the space grey, the silver and the gold version that's now currently available. There were 4 colour options in the iPad Pro. There was a rose gold and a standard gold, as well as the space grey and the silver, but I don't think that many people are going to be too concerned about the loss of one of the gold colours there in this newer incarnation of the same iPad pretty much. Now obviously you can still buy the older version iPad from 2017, you can still get it on Amazon. They still have new iPads or unused iPads for sale, and so I guess really the question is, do you want to get an older iPad, or do you want to go for one of the newer iPads? So in terms of the sizes of storage capacity, the new iPad Air comes in 64 gigabytes and 256 gigabytes. Now the storage options there, the 2 storage options, are basically double the size of the standard iPad, which comes in 32 or 128, but it doesn't have the top end option that the 2017 iPad Pro have of 512. Now for the 64 gigabyte storage, that will cost you $499 or £479, and then you go up quite dramatically to $649 for the 256 gigabyte version or £629 for the 256 version. So roughly the $500 or $562 for the 2017 iPad Pro. So there's around a $60 difference, and that's just one of the factors that you have to bear in mind. So to start with, I'm just going to be thinking mainly about the differences between the older version iPad Pro and this iPad Air 3, and then I'll explore some of the differences between the standard iPad and this iPad Air 3 as well. So like I say, it's the same screen size, it's the same screen resolution. One of the main differences is going to be the actual processor. So this has an A12 or Apple's A12 Bionic chip, whereas the older iPad, the iPad Pro, has the A10X Fusion chip in it. Now they're both pretty damn fast chips, but obviously the A12 Bionic chip is going to future-proof this device over the older iPad Pro. So in terms of investing in a device, it's still going to be the latest and greatest and up to date with all the newest operating systems. Then it's perhaps a safer bet to go for the newer iPad, although in some ways it's obviously not quite as highly spec'd. And one of the ways that it's not as highly spec'd as the older iPad Pro is that it only comes with 3 gig of RAM compared to the 4 gig that is on the iPad Pro. Now that doesn't make a lot of difference in many use cases. In an app like this, one of the differences you'll notice with that reduced amount of RAM is that you won't be able to create as many layers depending on the canvas size that you actually create. So if you are using the iPad Pro with that additional gig of RAM, you will notice that you can create extra layers and do even more complicated works of art. Having said that, 3 gig of RAM is still pretty significant. It's still a good amount for apps like this, and actually it goes a very long way nevertheless. So some of the other major differences will be that are things like the cameras. So this has a main camera which is 8 megapixels compared to the 12 megapixels of the older iPad Pro. Now personally, I never really use the camera on my iPads at all, but if you are one of the people that like to use the camera on the iPad, then that might be a significant aspect of your choice or your decision process. But if the cameras are only for occasional use and then you're not too bothered about it, then it's not a reason to stay away from the iPad Air 3. 8 megapixels, although it's not necessarily a great amount, it's not going to give you the best quality photographs compared to modern cameras on smartphones and iPads. 8 megapixels is still reasonably okay. If you're really concerned about your photography on the iPad, then really you need to go for a version of an iPad Pro. Personally, it really doesn't matter to me, so it's definitely not a factor. So the Face ID camera on both of the iPads is 7 meg, and they're both capable of 1080 HD video from the Face ID camera. The main camera, however, can go up to 4K on the iPad Pro, the older iPad Pro, whereas it only does 1080 HD video on this main camera in video. So again, as well as photography, if video is something that you're really going to use the iPad for, then possibly the older iPad is going to be worth spending a little bit extra on, even though it's perhaps not as good in some of the other areas. So as well as the cameras, another aspect is the speakers. So it only has 2 speakers on this iPad Air 3. It still gets pretty loud, but it's not as high quality. It doesn't really give you the separation of sound in quite the same way that the iPad Pro has with its 4 speakers. So if the sound that comes from your iPad is going to be important to you, then the iPad Pro again is a better option. Some aspects where they are the same is they both have True Tone. So if you like to use the iPad for maybe reading in different sort of ambient light environments, or you're doing sketching like I'm doing now and you want the background to sort of resemble the environment just to save straining your eye or for it to just seem a more natural experience, more like paper perhaps, then True Tone is perhaps a feature that you're going to appreciate. When I'm doing colour paintings, I tend to deactivate True Tone just because I want to keep the colours consistent regardless of the environment that I'm creating it in, but it can be very useful to some people. And both this iPad Air 3 and all of the iPad Pros have the P3 wide colour gamut as well, so it really pings those colours out, really vibrant colours, really gives you that broad range. They both have the pixels laminated to the screen, to the glass, so there's barely any noticeable difference, or distance rather, between the actual nib of the Apple Pencil and the pixels themselves. So really both a pretty much identical experience for the drawing. It does, however, not benefit from the extra fast screen refresh rate the iPad Pro does, so this has equivalent to sort of 50 frames per second, whereas the iPad Pro has the 120. Not something that really makes a massive difference in all honesty, but it does mean you get a slightly smoother kind of scrolling and appearance on the iPad Pro. So for me, if it was a choice between the older iPad Pro and the iPad Air 3, personally, I think I would probably go with the iPad Air 3. They're both compatible with smart keyboards. They both have the smart connector on the side. They don't fit the same kind of case, but in almost every way, they are pretty much the same device. There's 1 or 2 significant differences, perhaps if you are looking to use the camera and video, or you need that extra RAM. But for me personally, as an artist, I think that the kind of future-proofing of the iPad Air 3 with the better chip means that I think it's just a safer device to go for at this time. Having said that, some people I realise are going to want to feel that they have a pro device, but honestly I think that this is pretty much the same anyway, in most ways, and it's cheaper. So obviously the other option, or the other most sort of comparable iPad to this, is the standard iPad, the iPad 6, which is significantly cheaper. That starts at $329 for a 32GB, which is £319, and the max price you'll pay for storage is $429 for a 128GB version, which is £409. So if you really want the extra storage but you don't care about some of the other benefits, then you are going to get a cheaper iPad with double the amount of storage. So like I say, the 64GB version of the iPad Air 3 starts at $499, whereas the double the capacity, 128GB on the iPad 6, starts at $429 for that 128GB. So you could save yourself $70 and get double the storage capacity if that was one of your largest concerns, really. They weigh pretty much the same, so the standard iPad is quite heavy for its size, really, because it does have a smaller screen, and yet it's relatively speaking quite a heavy device. It's a little bit thicker. It only has a 9.7-inch screen. It has roughly the same pixels per inch, but it has fewer pixels on the screen overall because it has a smaller screen. But in terms of how you position it from your eye, you're probably going to experience the same kind of resolution, but it doesn't have as many pixels on the iPad 6 compared to the iPad Air 3. So this is better in terms of screen size, number of pixels. This has a laminated screen to the pixels, whereas the iPad 6 is not laminated to the pixels, and therefore the glass and the pixels have a slight gap between them, which is noticeable when you're tapping on the screen on the iPad 6. It's a louder sound. It's just, a little bit more noticeable. Whereas on this, it's pretty dull, pretty quiet when you tap on the screen. And generally, the build quality feels that little bit nicer on every other iPad now, apart from the iPad 6. But obviously, you pay a premium for that premium build as well. So the main cameras on the iPad 6 and this iPad Air 3, they are both 8 megapixels, so there's not much difference between the main cameras. However, the FaceTime camera is significantly worse on the iPad 6. It's only 1.2 megapixels for the face camera, which is, I think in this day and age, it's really not up to very much at all. They both have 1080 HD video, however, for the main camera. But again, the face camera on the iPad 6 only has 720 HD compared to the 1080 on this one. The iPad 6 also has 2 speakers, just like this. So you're going to get a similar kind of sound. It's a bit louder on this, and because of the distance between the speakers, arguably you could say there's a slight bit more sort of separation, but really not much difference. Not compared to the iPad Pro, which has 4 speakers. So again, both of these iPads are not necessarily the kind of iPads you would get if you were looking at video, camera, or sound quality coming from the devices. If you want those things, really, you're better off getting some version of an iPad Pro. Now, like we were saying before, this has the P3 wide colour gamut. The iPad 6 does not have that. It's still pretty good in terms of colours, but it's not quite as expansive a colour range as you have on the other iPads. The iPad 6 also does not have True Tone, and it only has 2 GB of RAM. So you're not going to get as many layers in an app like this on the standard iPad 6 compared to this and the iPad Pros. Now, pretty much all the iPads available claim to have about 10 hours battery life. Now, obviously that depends what you're using it for. I find that if I'm using apps that are quite, battery intensive, like Procreate, then I find that you won't get 10 hours out of any of them. But they seem to all claim pretty much the same kind of battery life. So there's not a lot to choose for batteries between them, whether you get the standard iPad, the iPad Air 3, the iPad mini, or the iPad Pro. They all claim to have about 10 hours. The iPad 6 doesn't have a smart keyboard compatible with it. You can attach keyboards via Bluetooth, but it doesn't have a smart connector on the iPad 6 compared to this and iPad Pros. So if you're looking to get some real work done on your iPad, then you're better going for something like this, the iPad Air 3 or the iPad Pro, and giving the iPad 6, the standard iPad, a miss. One of the big differences is obviously the raw power. The iPad 6 or the standard iPad only has an A10 Fusion chip. Again, this has an A12 Bionic chip, so we have the latest and greatest sort of Apple chip available in this. Well, compared to the other iPads, there isn't the iPad Pro. The iPad Pro has a more powerful chip. This chip is equivalent to what's in the latest iPhones, which is a pretty damn fast processor. It's definitely going to be future-proof for a number of years. But yeah, we have a less powerful chip in the standard iPad. But again, I don't really think that's going to be a massive problem for a few years either. The good thing about most iPads is they do just seem to keep going for quite a long time. So my overall opinion about this iPad, which is the whole purpose of this video, obviously, to test this iPad, to see how it feels, to see how it works as a drawing device, as an art creation device. Compared to the other iPads, I think that this sits somewhere, I think it's deliberately intended to sit somewhere directly kind of in the middle of all their devices. I think wherever you fall within the spectrum of requirements of an iPad, the iPad Air 3 is going to satisfy most people, and it is significantly cheaper than the newest iPad Pros, and it's also cheaper than the older iPad Pros still. Now, if you're looking to get a used one, however, obviously you might be able to get older iPad Pros cheaper than this new, but assuming that we're talking about devices that haven't been used, then this, for its price, is really good value, I feel. You're going to be able to use a device like this to do sketching, painting, pretty much anything that you're going to be able to do on an iPad Pro. It doesn't come with some of the latest features. It doesn't have a magnet that attaches, charges and pairs the Apple Pencil. It's not compatible with the second generation Apple Pencil. You're stuck with the first gen. You've still got the Lightning and the Touch ID. You've still got, however, a 3.5mm headphone port. So it hasn't got the latest and greatest of everything, but I think it's got all the kind of the areas that most people are going to actually fundamentally want the device to do. In terms of the device that I would recommend to people, again, it's difficult. I think if you want to do predominantly sketching, you've never had an iPad before, you don't necessarily need it for more complex pieces of artwork, then you might want to consider the newest iPad mini. It's a really portable device, really great for handling, for sticking in your bag. It's a fantastic drawing experience, just the same as this in terms of drawing. It's a smaller screen, so you'd have to pinch in and out to get some of those details added. But the iPad mini, I think, is a wonderful device just for drawing on the go. However, if you want to do drawing and painting, then you might be better off with a device like this. If you know you're going to do lots of artwork and you really want the biggest screen and the most convenience, then the iPad Pro is perhaps the one to go for. If you're really restricted financially and you still want to get into digital painting and drawing on an iPad, then the budget version, the standard iPad, is still a fantastic device. In fact, every single new device on the market at the moment is fantastic for drawing. It's possible to create any kind of artwork on all of them. You're only limited, I would say, by your ability and your imagination, and I think that if you're a good artist, you can make any of the current devices work for you. I think for many people, the iPad Air 3 is going to be the absolute perfect device. It does the vast majority of things you want. It's a more portable size. You can still attach a smart keyboard, so you can use it for typing, for producing Word documents. It's small enough that you can sketch on the go. You can still do full paintings and full pieces of artwork on it. It's going to last you. It's going to be future-proofed. It's not as hideously expensive as some of the iPad Pros are. I think that actually it's going to be the perfect device for a lot of people. It seems almost like an unnecessary device because it on first appearances, it seems to closely resemble the other offerings that have been before and are currently available. But actually, if your options are the newest iPad Pro, the newest standard iPad, or the newest iPad mini, I think that in many ways it's got the best of everything. Personally, I couldn't be happier with my iPad Pro. I really do like the new form factor. I like the new Apple Pencil and the way that interacts with the newest iPad Pros. And I do like the slightly larger screen because I like to get really detailed, complex paintings. But when I first started producing artwork on the iPad, it was the iPad Air, and it didn't have an Apple Pencil compatible with it. So I was just having to import drawings and then paint over the top of them. I couldn't really sketch on it, not very effectively anyway. And so if this had been the device that I'd been able to buy at the time, I would have been amazed, and to be honest, it would have been absolutely enough for me. And I think for the vast majority of artists out there, the iPad Air 3 is going to be a fantastic solution. I think the standard iPad is perhaps good for education, good for schools, good for a basic device for those people, or for situations where money won't stretch quite far enough, or you need to buy them in bulk, buy a larger quantity. It's a good place to save. But if you're really looking to just have a device for your own personal use and you want the nicest experience, honestly, it's worth spending that little bit extra and you'll be much happier with this as a device rather than the standard iPad. However, like I said, if you've already settled for a standard iPad, don't feel that you're missing out too much. You're still going to be able to create fantastic artwork, even on the most basic iPads these days. Anyway, I hope that's been helpful. Please check out my other videos. I do other types of drawings and paintings, tutorials, as well as testing newest Apple iPads when they come onto the market as well. Hope I've been of some service, some help to some people out there. Please feel free to comment your opinions about the different iPad offerings. Try to get around to replying to most people. It takes me a little bit of time sometimes to get around to every comment, but I do try my best, so please feel free to leave whatever comment you want to leave, and I'll catch you back here again. See you later.